In the middle of a grand, glittering restaurant where every fork shines like silver stars and every glance feels like it carries judgment, one woman steps in, nervous, uncertain, but impossible to ignore. She doesn't belong to this world of perfect manners and practiced smiles. Yet tonight she's about to sit at the table where money, power, and elegance rule. And the question is simple: will she survive the pressure, or will she shine even brighter because she dares to be herself? The camera moves through the wide golden doors of an elegant dining hall. Without showing faces, the visuals reveal polished marble floors, soft music rising from a corner where a violinist plays, and tables dressed in white linen like spotless canvases waiting for stories. The waiters glide between chairs, their movements rehearsed like dancers in a quiet ballet. Each guest is dressed to impress, jewels sparkle, hands wave with grace, and voices hum in polite, controlled tones. This is a place where every detail matters, and any mistake could echo louder than the music. Into this setting steps Vivian. Her footsteps are not as steady as the others. The camera follows her shoes, a little too bold for the room, but they carry her forward anyway. She pauses, just slightly, as if the weight of 100 unseen eyes presses down on her. The narration whispers, she isn't from this world and everyone can feel it. But there she is, standing beside Edward, who leads her with quiet confidence. His steps are calm, as if the room bends around his presence, creating a path just for the two of them. The camera lingers on the details. Vivian's hand brushing against the side of her dress, smoothing fabric that already looks perfect to anyone else but feels out of place to her. Edward, on the other hand, adjusts his cufflinks in one smooth motion, completely at ease. The difference is clear. One belongs, the other is trying to belong. And yet, that very tension is what makes the moment electric. As they reach the table, a waiter pulls out a chair. Vivian hesitates. For a moment, it looks like she's not sure if she should sit right away or wait for some unspoken signal. Edward nods, reassuring her without a word. She sits down, and the sound of her chair echoes louder than expected, like a drumbeat announcing her presence. Around her, other diners glance briefly, then return to their meals, but not without a faint smirk or raised eyebrow. The narration continues softly. Every move feels like a test. Every gesture feels like a lesson. And for Vivian, passing those tests is harder than any game she's ever played. The camera drifts across the table. Polished silver cutlery lined up like an army, crystal glasses waiting to be filled, and a folded napkin resting in front of her like a challenge. Vivian looks at it, then at Edward. He notices, and without making it obvious, he shows her how to place it on her lap. She copies him, and the smallest smile flickers across her face like she's won a tiny victory in a battle. No one else can see. The background sound shifts, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the distant laughter of a group at another table. Everything seems to remind her that she doesn't belong. But Edward leans toward her slightly, saying something just out of the audience's hearing range. His tone is calm, reassuring, as if telling her she's doing fine. The narration fills the gap. It isn't just about dinner. It's about stepping into a world that isn't hers and finding the courage to stay. As the section closes, the waiter pours wine into their glasses. Vivian watches carefully, trying to copy the way Edward holds his. She takes a sip, almost too fast, and coughs softly. For a split second, she's embarrassed, but Edward hides his laugh behind a polite smile, letting her know it's okay. The scene doesn't need words to explain. It shows everything in silence, in glances, in tiny mistakes that make her human. And in a room full of practiced perfection, that humanity might be the most powerful thing of all. The moment Vivian settles into her seat, the true performance begins. The restaurant is more than just a place to eat. It is a stage where gestures matter more than words, and appearances can speak louder than conversation. Vivian knows this, even if she doesn't know the rules. Her hands rest uneasily near the edge of the table, unsure whether to move or stay still. Her eyes dart, catching glimpses of how others around her behave, how a woman 2 tables away raises her glass with practiced elegance, how a man slices his food with slow precision, almost as though he is painting a careful stroke on canvas. Vivian studies them like a student cramming for an exam, but the pressure makes it hard to memorize. Across from her, Edward sits with an ease that only years of belonging to this world could bring. His posture is perfect without thought, his movements unhurried but purposeful. He doesn't flaunt his confidence, but it radiates from him in the way he gently signals the waiter, in the way his eyes remain calm while Vivian's flicker with uncertainty. He notices her tension and in his quiet way becomes her guide, not by giving lessons aloud, but by offering her examples to follow. The waiter arrives with menus. Thick, leather-bound, heavy with names of dishes written in a language that feels foreign to Vivian's tongue. She opens it, her eyes racing across words that blur together. She doesn't recognize most of them. Panic rises quietly in her chest, but she hides it with a smile. Edward, sensing this, leans forward and mentions a few selections in a casual tone, like it's no big deal. He points to one dish and explains it's simply boiled lobster with lemon butter. No flourish, no pretension. Vivian nods, relief washing over her. The narration whispers, in a place built to intimidate, kindness becomes a lifeline. As the waiter leaves, Vivian straightens her back, trying to copy the grace of the diners around her. She picks up a glass of water but hesitates, unsure which one belongs to her. There are 3 before her, 2 different glasses and a small one she can't name. She stares at them, her nerves almost visible in the way her fingers twitch. Edward casually reaches for his water glass, lifting it in an unhurried motion. Vivian follows, lifting the correct one as if she knew all along. It's such a small thing, but it feels like passing a test. Humor blooms in the silence between. Then Vivian shifts in her chair, trying to appear natural, but she knocks her fork slightly out of place. It clatters, drawing the briefest glance from a nearby table. She bites her lip, embarrassed, but Edward quietly places it back with a smile so faint it looks like nothing happened. In that moment, the narration notes, he doesn't laugh at her mistakes, he shields them. He turns them into something invisible. The food arrives with ceremony. Plates glide onto the table, sauces shimmer under soft lights, and the aroma fills the air. Vivian leans in slightly, curious but cautious. She doesn't know how to start, but Edward gives her a gentle nod, lifting his knife and fork with ease. She imitates him, her movements stiff at first, but she manages. Every time she glances at him, he becomes a mirror of what she wishes to be: calm, graceful, certain. Yet, in trying to copy him, she finds herself making mistakes. Cutting too. Quickly, holding the fork awkwardly, placing the knife too close to the plate's edge. Each misstep draws her further into the silent tug-of-war between who she is and who she's trying to be. But then, something subtle shifts. Vivian laughs soft, natural, almost involuntary, when she realizes her fork is upside down. Edward chuckles too, but not at her. He shares the moment, letting her see that imperfection isn't the enemy. And in that laugh, the tension cracks open, releasing the pressure that had built around her. For the first time since sitting down, she breathes without fear of judgment. The narration rises gently. This dinner is not about food. It is about belonging. It is about learning how to move in a world that feels impossible. And it is about discovering that authenticity, even clumsy, even imperfect, can shine brighter than all the polish in the room. As the section closes, Vivian lifts her glass, this time with certainty. She looks across the table, not at the crowd, not at the shimmering chandeliers, but at Edward. Her smile is small but real. For the first time tonight, she feels less like an outsider and more like a guest. The rhythm of the restaurant grows, louder, though the music hasn't changed. It is Vivian's own heartbeat that quickens, making the clinking of silverware and the rustle of linens sound almost overwhelming. She has survived the opening of the evening, finding her glass, placing her napkin, copying Edward's posture, but survival is not the same as comfort. Now the true test arrives in the form of a plate, carried with careful ceremony by a waiter, who looks as if he were delivering a treasure. The dish lands before her. Escargot. A word that feels foreign in her mouth and even stranger on the plate. Small shells glisten with butter and herbs, steaming lightly under the soft glow of the chandelier. Vivian leans closer, squinting at the delicate tools placed beside its slender tongs. A tiny fork objects that look more like surgical instruments than anything meant for dinner. She hesitates, her fingers hovering above them, unsure which. To touch first dot across the table, Edward demonstrates with the ease of a man who has done this countless times. He secures the shell with the tong, twists the fork with precision, and lifts the snail effortlessly from its home. To him, it is nothing. To Vivian, it is a performance worthy of an Olympic medal. She swallows, picks up the tongs, and clamps. Down on one shell, but her grip is too tight. The buttered surface slips, the shell nearly shoots from her hand, and in a desperate attempt to control it, she jerks the tong back too quickly. The snail pops free only to leap across her plate like a tiny rebel refusing capture. For a moment, the world freezes. Vivian stares at the runaway escargot, her cheeks burning. The people at the next table glance over, their eyes holding a mix of curiosity and amusement. A waiter coughs politely, pretending not to notice. Edward, however, hides his smile behind a sip of wine. The narration cuts in softly. Every empire has rules. And when you break them, you don't just hear the sound, you feel the silence that follows. Vivian, unable to contain herself, laughs. Not a polite laugh, but a true, bubbling laugh that escapes before she can stop it. It is the kind of laugh that doesn't belong in a room like this, yet somehow makes the room feel warmer. Edward joins her quietly, his chuckle low, protective, as if telling her it's safe to find humor in her mistakes. The tension breaks. What could have been humiliation transforms into charm. What could have been mockery becomes endearment. The waiter discreetly replaces the shell, but Vivian's confidence shifts. She picks up the tools again, this time less carefully, more naturally. She isn't copying Edward anymore, she's attempting it her way. The fork slips, the snail resists, but eventually she manages. She lifts it with triumph, almost holding it too high, as if to say, "Look, I can do this too." She places it into her mouth, chewing cautiously, her expression uncertain until a small smile spreads. The taste surprises her. She likes it. The narration rises. Sometimes mistakes are the bridge. Sometimes laughter builds the confidence that grace alone cannot. Around them, the wealthy crowd continues as if nothing happened. Yet something has shifted. Vivian is no longer just the outsider. She is the spark of unpredictability in a world that feeds on routine. Her clumsy charm makes her more memorable than all the polished gestures surrounding her. Edward sees this. His gaze lingers on her longer, softer, not as a teacher watching a student, but as a man seeing something rare, authenticity wrapped in courage. As the meal continues, smaller moments ripple with humor. Vivian stirs her soup a little too loudly, catching the waiter's glance, then giggles under her breath. She nearly dips the wrong spoon, only to quickly correct herself at the last second. Each tiny mishap feels like a crack in the armor of the elite world, letting a bit of humanity leak in. And with every laugh, every shrug, every smile, she is no longer playing their game. She is rewriting it. The section ends with one final mishap. Vivian raises her glass too quickly, and a drop of wine lands on her napkin. She freezes, embarrassed again. But Edward calmly takes his napkin, dabs the table, and whispers something only she can hear. Though the audience never hears his words, the look on her face says everything: reassurance, partnership, and maybe even admiration. The narration closes. In the language of the rich, mistakes are sins. But in the language of connection, mistakes are simply moments waiting to be shared. The laughter fades into something quieter, something steadier. The table that once felt like a battlefield of silverware and glass now feels like neutral ground. Vivian, who entered the restaurant as if she were stepping into enemy territory, begins to relax into the rhythm of the evening. Her movements are still imperfect, her gestures still a little too bold or a little too hesitant, but they no longer feel like mistakes. They feel like her. The waiter clears the plates, his steps silent but precise, as though he were erasing evidence of the chaos that had unfolded minutes ago. Yet Vivian doesn't shrink under his formal manner anymore. She sits taller, her shoulders eased, her smile less forced. She has survived the gauntlet of dining etiquette, not by perfecting it, but by reshaping it into something that belongs to her. Across from her, Edward watches. His gaze is not the detached calm of a man used to control, but the soft admiration of someone discovering beauty in the unexpected. He has dined with countless people in countless rooms just like this, surrounded by chandeliers and flawless manners. But this watching Vivian laugh at her own clumsy courage, watching her break every unspoken rule and still glow brighter than anyone in the room, this is different. Dessert arrives. A delicate creation, layers of chocolate and cream resting on a porcelain plate. Vivian looks at it with wide eyes, half in awe and half in suspicion. She picks up the wrong fork at first, then corrects herself, chuckling as she does. The sound is freer now, as though the weight of expectation has lifted. She takes a bite, and for the first time tonight, she doesn't glance at Edward for guidance. She closes her eyes, savoring the taste, allowing herself to exist fully in the moment. The narration lingers. Sometimes the greatest victory is not in learning how to blend in, but in daring to stand out. Sometimes grace is not found in the rules, but in the courage to break them. The camera moves through details, Vivian's hand resting lightly on the table, her glass lifted with newfound steadiness, the subtle smile at the corner of Edward's lips. It doesn't show faces, but it shows connection. Two people, worlds apart, finding a bridge between them not built on etiquette, but on authenticity. Around them, the restaurant hums on, unchanged. The wealthy crowd still dines with their polished perfection, but at this one table, something has shifted. Vivian, once nervous and unsure, has carved her place not by copying the room, but by daring to be herself within it. Edward, once her guide, is now simply her companion, looking at her not as someone who needs saving, but as someone who has saved the night with her honesty. As the evening winds down, Vivian leans back in her chair, a small satisfied sigh escaping. The napkin on her lap is stained, the fork isn't perfectly placed, and her laugh has carried too far across the room more than once. And yet none of it matters. What matters is the connection at the table, the story they've written together in stolen glances, in awkward moments. In shared laughter, the camera pans upward, catching the chandelier above, the light scattering like tiny stars across the room. The narration offers its closing thought. In a world built on appearances, it is easy to believe perfection is the goal. But perfection is silent, forgettable. It is imperfection, the slip of a fork, the stain on a napkin, the laugh too loud that makes us unforgettable. And tonight, in the most elegant room, it is not the wealth or the polish that shines. It is the courage of a woman who dared to be herself. The final image lingers on the two glasses, side by side, nearly empty. Their stems touch, leaning slightly toward each other. The music fades, the chatter blurs, and the scene dissolves slowly into darkness.